So part B, or part 2, is the review itself. As I said, when we came in, we decided to do a review. We had schemes, or one scheme, which was essentially 2 schemes wrapped up into a Western Bypass, the Hereford Transport Package and the South Wide Transport Package, but no other real plans except for some sort of perfunctory nod to modal shift and shared space cycle lanes that were going to come after the actual roads had been built. I forgot to say that when we came in, one of the first things that the officers told us that the planning permission was about to run out on the Southern Link Road because everything had been going on for so long, trying to get the permission and trying to get the business case working properly together. And so before we did this review, we actually preserved the planning permission by doing some work on one of our council farms. And we had, obviously, as we all know, many council farms, and we sold them, which was an absolute crying shame. They were making money. Their land value was going up by something like 10% every year, and for some reason the Conservatives decided to sell them. But they did hang on to 2, strangely enough, along the route that they wanted to use. And we then thought about we thought about this, and we thought, well, we got to preserve the permission, so we allowed some work to be done on one of these farms that was sufficient to say that the work had started. We did that partly because we said we were coming in to review the schemes, and if we allowed one to kind of cancel itself out because of the incompetence of the previous administration and lose that opportunity to actually build that road, if the kind of review said it was important to do, then we had to preserve the permission. So we did do that. Anyway, we commissioned the review. We used WSB, who'd done all the work on the Hereford Bypass before, to look at the new and alternative stuff. And we used a company called Mott MacDonald to look at the work that had been done before to make sure it was sufficiently well done by WSB. So the work on the Hereford Western Bypass and Southern Link Road, etc. And the interesting stuff that Mott said was that there was a few, generally things were done, okay. There was some oddities in the fact that lots of alternative options seemed to have been discounted a bit too quickly, and road building had been concentrated on a little bit too early. And second thing they said, which was more important, is since those early plans, because these projects stretch back, as I said, up to 10, 12 years, since those early plans, the requirement by government to consider environmental implications was far, far greater, and that these probably wouldn't stand muster in that regard. They'd have to be reassessed. So that was interesting. Anyway, WSB did a whole lot of work for us. They came up with some interesting stats about the city, which was part of the money that had gone into the modelling, was to help us understand this. And one of the things that came clear is that Hereford has got a higher proportion of local traffic, the city itself, than many other cities. And many other cities people commute out of or commute into to a greater degree than we do. In Hereford, we've got a high proportion of traffic that's local traffic. So I think 38% of city commutes, so city residents, 38% of the commutes are less than 1.2 miles. Now that's a huge amount, and that's a very short distance, really. That's a 25-minute walk or a 15-minute. 10-minute cycle. 73% of Hereford residents' commuting trips are less than 3.1 miles. So 38 are less than 1.2 miles, and 73% of Hereford residents' commuting trips are less than 3.1 miles. So that's 20 minutes on a bicycle. We use our cars much more to go shorter distances than almost, I wouldn't say almost any other city, than most cities by a long way. Half of our school journeys are done by car. That's much, much higher than the national average. And walking to school is only about a quarter, which is much, much lower than the national average. And we all know that school traffic is a problem in Hereford. If schools are off, we know the roads flow better. And yet we've never properly addressed school traffic, and that's something we intend to do. In terms of sort of strategic traffic, because people say people want to, people want to bypass Hereford. The problem is people are trying to bypass Hereford. Well, there's a couple of things there. If they were trying to bypass Hereford, why would we build a Western Bypass into Three Elms, and what's going to be a housing estate of 1,500 houses that developers that may or may not support your own political party and donate to it want to build on. Why wouldn't you build it much further out if you were trying to genuinely bypass? If the need to bypass a city was there, why wouldn't you build it much further out at Kingsacre Holt or something like that? Or why wouldn't the government get involved? Why? Because it's a strategic road, the A49. We don't control it in Hereford, and even when it comes into Hereford and goes up, over Greyfriars and Victoria Street and up into Edgar Street, it's not our road. It's a government road, and then it obviously becomes the A49, carries on up again onto Leominster. If the government thought that Hereford was causing huge impact on its national road network and its strategic network, and the 49 in particular, they would have told us years ago. They would have just built a bypass. But they haven't done it because the stats still show that most of the traffic is not trying to pass it. It's trying to get in and around Hereford. It's not trying to get past it. So only 7% of traffic, of the latest stats, is trying to go through Hereford and use it as part of the strategic network. So, coming off the road at Wilton and Ross and coming up the 49 and going to Shrewsbury, for example, only about 7% is trying to do that. 40% of our daily traffic in Hereford City doesn't even leave the city boundaries. It stays within the city. And 27%, 25 and 27, so 52 in total, has an origin or destination in the city. So in other words, it's going from just inside the city to just outside, or just outside to just inside. So it's local traffic. Someone's going from Hereford to Cllr or Barter Street to Hereford on a daily basis. So once again, they're not trying to bypass the city. So why would you build a huge big ring road when you could solve problems by getting traffic moving in a different way within the city? Because it's like saying, rather than deal with the problem in the centre of the town, I'm just going to build this big, huge ring road. And it's not for bypassing traffic. It's just for people in Hereford to keep going round to come in from the kind of angle they'd want to do. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense environmentally. It doesn't make sense value for money. It's just really quite illogical, to be perfectly honest. The biggest quadrant. So for the purposes of this review, the city was broken up into 4 quadrants, and the quadrant that has the biggest amount of traffic and the movements is the northeast. So that's Tupsley, Hampton Park, Ayleston, but they do include the city centre in that. And actually the one that has the lowest of local traffic is Belmont, which is really interesting. And there's about 22,000 vehicle movements a day in that Tupsley quadrant that don't leave that quadrant. So they stay within Tupsley, Hampton Park, city centre. They don't go any further. And 40,000 daily journeys a day in Hereford have their origin and destination in the same quadrant. So 40,000 car journeys are staying in the Bobblestock area, Homer area, or the Tupsley, Hampton Park area, or the Belmont area, or the Saxon Gate, Red Hill area. They don't go out of that, and it just shows you what high proportions of local traffic we have. And 80,000 car journeys in Hereford a day don't leave the city boundaries. I mean, it just shows you how local our traffic is. It is extraordinary. And this comes back to the point again that we do need another river crossing. The Greyfriars Bridge is nearly 60 years old. It was built in 1966. It's not going to fail immediately, but it's going to start to become more and more difficult to maintain as we go beyond its kind of projected lifespan, and we do need another bridge. And if you have local traffic rather than a bypass traffic, and I think we've identified that through this review, and people knew this anyway from common knowledge, but it's good to have the facts, then why are we not just building another bridge for resilience and access and getting people to really change the way they travel by making better roads for them for cycling and walking, and improving the bus network so we could go back to a system like we had with the hoppers at the end of the 80s. Why wouldn't we do that? Why wouldn't we do that? Why would we build a big bypass to the west instead? A bypass, as I said, that will take 10 years to build and can't be delivered as quickly as some of these other measures. It doesn't make sense. So for us, modal shift is critical. We live in a world that's changed. Whether you believe in a climate emergency or not is up to you. Okay, but we accept there's a climate emergency, and we think where we have a city like Hereford, which so much traffic is local, and we travel such short distances on a daily basis to commute or go to school or go shopping. Let's really put effort, let's really put money into making it safe and healthy, and the go-to choice for people to cycle and walk those short distances. Let's really put money into helping get a really good bus system, regular bus system going again. And let's put money into an eastern crossing so that we have the resilience of another bridge. All possible. People say to me very often, if I say something about, spending a lot of money on cycling routes and segregated cycling routes, by the way, we can't have these shared routes that the Conservatives pursued, even when national legislation was starting to lean towards, not supporting them anymore. We've got to have proper, decent, segregated cycle routes that people feel safe on. The average test is that if a 10-year-old feels safe on a cycle route, that's what you should be aiming for. And that's why you can't have shared space on roads, on pavements. You've got to have dedicated routes where you can, or very, very low speed environments if you're going to mix modes. So we put some money aside. We had our council meetings. It was carried. This is what the majority of councillors in Hereford want to do. As I said, it's easy to be emotive and to think that your problems could be solved if a bypass was built. It's not going to be built quickly. These things that we want to do can actually make the difference much, much more quickly. And, you've got to take some responsibility as people who live in the city. We need to travel in a different way so that people who have to come from further out, from some of the villages and towns, if they're coming into Hereford, or if people are vulnerable and have to use their vehicles because they're disabled or whatever it is, can use their vehicles. We have to make sacrifices, and maybe even not sacrifices, because we might enjoy cycling and walking more if the facilities are there, if we spend the money on it. We need to make changes. We need to accept we live in a different world, and we need to accept that this is probably the most sensible thing to have done anyway, regardless of a climate emergency. And I think I've lost track slightly, but part 3 coming next.